Welcome everybody to the Hungarian Scruton Hub podcast. Today we are delighted to welcome Pablo Alvarez Funes, architect and educator, who puts a big emphasis on giving a voice to traditional architecture in a contemporary time. Welcome, Pablo.
Thank you very much.
Let's just jump right into it.
Yes.
Let's talk about your work. Your work is heavily focused on architectural tradition and providing an output for historical precedent. What do you think? What do cities and communities lose when they don't think about these sorts of ideas before urban planning?
I think that one of the main things that you lose is your own identity and your own precedents. No? A lot of the architecture in which we live, it's based on a series of conditions and precedents that made you take some decisions based on materials, based on weather, and all the modernist culture in which we live basically just puts the same thing everywhere, which means that that same solution, which might seem convenient for the economy, is not so convenient for the placemaking. We cannot have the same sort of block of glass here in Budapest than you could have in southern Spain or in the Emirates or in Oslo. There is elements that when everything becomes the same, you lose part of who you are. So I think that in that regard, that there is a loss in the sense of belonging and a loss in what actually makes a place truly unique. That might be food, that might be architecture, that might be the way a window is shaped, the way a tile is done, the way we even carve a capital. All that is rooted in the local tradition. So I think it is important to hear the genius loci, the genius of the place, and what makes the place special, because I think it's a big loss when we lose our identities. And it is important to keep it, because that's what makes us unique.
And do you think keeping this tradition is the job of the architects itself?
I think it's a collective job. The architect has the duty of ensuring that has to be kept, has to be retained, but it's also part of the general public to understand the importance of their own tradition. So if the public doesn't appreciate the tradition, the architect cannot keep it by himself. And at the same time, if the public is appreciating the tradition and is demanding that tradition, the architect will have to follow. And I think that's something that you see consistently wherever a new trend of tradition starts to appear, people will start to request it, and later on the architect just follows. I mean, I could give you the example around in Paris, Val de Wop started 30 years ago with traditional developments. You see the buildings that were done 30 years ago, they were a bit clumsy. You see the quality that is done now is exquisite. And that is because there has been a retrofitting of demand from both sides. The architect is promoting this architecture, but also the public is demanding it. You need to have both. But I would say that it is important that the public is aware that the tradition and the crafts are important and that they can be reclaimed and retaken. So don't listen always to the architect saying it is not possible, because it is possible, and then demand it. So it has to be a two-side way.
Do you think that education can create this demand in the public?
Yes. That's something interesting, because something that we talk a lot about, educating the client or educating potential clients. Because many times I think it's coming to my mind an image from an artist called Fuseli, called The Artist in Front of the Grandeur of the Ruins, and you see a person crying in front of the Roman ruins. And many times this is what we have been told. The only thing we can do, just cry in front of the ruins. Yeah, they were beautiful, but those are times bygone. And no, I mean, I think it's important to make people aware that you can have this. No matter if they tell you that no, you have it, you have a lot of buildings, you have a lot of traditional practices doing it, and it is necessary the public to sometimes be educated, sometimes to self-educate it, and that's why we have like places like this, social media, etc., to just offer the view to the public.
This is very in line with what Roger Scruton thinks about architecture, because he also doesn't think that architecture is just a mere necessity, just a tool. He also thinks that it is a community shaping, a cultural shaping device, and he also thinks that architects have a moral obligation to provide this sense of community to its people. Do you think that today's urban planning is hindering it?
I would say that it's more architecture sometimes to rendering it. I mean, there is a lot of fallacies that we have been inheriting from modernism, telling you the importance of the car, the importance of zoning, separating everything, the idea of the tower in the garden as the skyscraper surrounded by greenery. So there is a lot of element in urban planning that they don't work there, that we thought that they would work, and now we're stuck with them. And there is also elements in architecture that, again, we thought they would work and they don't. One of the things that we normally say at the Classic Planning Institute is that there is no good plan without good architecture. So then both of them need to work together. And in that sense, the architect and the planner, or both of them, depending on the country, because in many countries they are the same person, they need to have that duty of understanding the place and understand that the place is more important than their own taste or their own ideology, because sometimes it's a matter of a preference. No? The architect provides this because they thought, that's what we have been told in the architectural schools, that this is the way to go, and then it doesn't work, but then it's the people who don't know the thing. So I think that there is something very important to say in the way we design our cities. We need to talk about densities, we need to talk about traffic, we need to talk about a lot of elements that we give for granted, and they are not. So I think that especially the topic of the density is very important, because we think that we are going to solve everything. We just put in towers in the garden and skyscrapers, and that's not the only way to go. The so-called gentle density is a more interesting approach.
So do you think traditional architectural approaches can solve this issue created by modern urban planning today?
I think it has, and there is several examples all over the world where this has been proved that it works. You have Ciudad Cayala, you have Pondbury, you have Plessis Robinsons, you have Val d'Europe. So you have several of them in which, and even before the Second World War, you have Garbatella in Rome. You have a lot of experience in Spain of doing reconstructing villages after the Civil War. So there is that thing of traditional architecture proves, because it's already rooted in the place. So because you are already putting something that you know that is going to work, so you have half of the way done without having to reinvent the wheel every time you get a pencil, which I remember it was something that we were told a lot. No, you need to reinvent architecture with every time you get the pencil, which if you take about language, it could be like we need to invent a new language every time we open our mouths. So that would be impossible. So why do we need to do that in architecture? There is a space for novelty, there is a space for innovation, but within tradition, like as many languages have.
Mm-hmm. There is this popular saying among critics of the traditional approach, of critics of the people who say that they don't like these glass and concrete blocks all over their cities. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Can you tell me what do you think about this saying?
I am of the opinion that that the beauty is a universal category, or there are universal categories of beauty in that sense, of the objective beauty. And in that regard, there are elements that we know that they work, and they have been working. And this thing of beauty is in the eye of the beholder is one of the fallacies of modernism, just probably because to justify itself. It reminds me to the famous tale of the new clothes of the emperor, that only the smart people could see, and it has proved like quite a good technique to make it look. No, if you don't like it, it's because you're not smart enough. But I think that there is something beyond that it's based on, again, the connection to the locale, the connection to the precedent, the import, and also the importance of a very well proportioned design, because that's what makes it look good. So, and that is what the objective beauty resides in, the correct use of a combination of all those elements.
So do you think that there are no universal rules, but there are localized rules in localized communities?
I think that there are universal rules. Those are there, but then they are locally applied. So, and with classical architecture, which is my specialty, you see that you have the classical language, you have the orders, but then they are applied in different ways. So, for example, yesterday we were at the Ludovica University, and we were quite mesmerized with the way they are using the composite capitals and applying, because obviously it was a military building, so everything has to look military. So, and the composite ordering is the less of the military orders. So it's a very flamboyant order. So it was very interesting how they were combining and putting here and there elements, military elements. So that's a good example of how you have universal rules that then are applied locally. And classical architecture is perfect for that. And then you have the different traditions that obviously, because they come from the place, they have to be rooted into something and they have to be locally applied. What is probably good to build in Budapest might not be so good to build in Spain and vice versa. So those are the local identities that you need to respect, but the architecture of the Buda Castle is as good, as classical, and as easily approachable to the architecture of the Royal Palace in Madrid. So both of them speak the same language. So that's what they would say. You have the universal language and then the local application.
You have worked all around the world. You have worked in Europe, you have worked in Asia and in the Middle East region. Across your travels, how do you feel? Do people feel more connected to the architectural pieces that have these universal rules applied to them?
I think they do. I mean, normally when they come to a traditional farm, it's because they already want something traditional. Sometimes it is interesting because obviously, especially in the Middle East, they have that thing. Some people want to be proper Middle East looking, or the Orientalist look, but others want neoclassical, and sometimes it depends on their own background. Because some of them, usually the people who come are sheikh and sheikhs from the nobility, and then they say, oh, my parents live in a neoclassical palace, so I want to have a more arabesque, Moorish one, or vice versa. You start showing them Moorish, oh, that's my dad's house, I want something different, but they all want a tradition. And especially in the Middle East, they are very aware of the tradition and they're very protective. I mean, you see a contrast, no? You see all these massive skyscrapers in Dubai and in Qatar, but then people are very jealous and keeping a very, they're very precious about their tradition and keeping it. Oh, we want the little things that they have, because they were little fisherman villages until they discovered the oil. They're very conscious on keeping it. And I think it's also an example to follow wherever you hardly have any tradition. How do you build a new tradition? Because you cannot, 2 generations ago they were fishermen. Now they have planes and they have their own plane. They have 20 Ferraris, etc. So how do you still keep the tradition in 2 generations that have changed? And it's very interesting in that. When you work in Europe, it's slightly different because the tradition is already there. And obviously, if you're building a house in England, people will demand an English country house. If you're in Scotland, they will demand the Scottish style. In Spain, the Spanish style. There will be a sense of, okay, or you're in the French Riviera, they will ask for something totally different to that you are in the north of France, which will be more Versailles. While you go to the Riviera, it will have a more fresh Italianate look. So on that sense, there is this approach, there is this will of wanting to have, or if you go to the United States, even if they want something looking classical and European, they will they will have their own version. Or if you go to Brazil, there is houses, people will say, oh, I want something European-like. And then they will start showing you images of Tuscany, of French Riviera. But then when you tell them, look, I mean, you have your own tradition, especially in
their own material,
you should do this, because if you import all this, it's not going to work, because even the stone, that's interesting. If you import the stone from far away, the stone is born in a place, is created in a place. If you take that from that place, stops behaving. It's not as if it was alive, but it has been created based on a series of conditions that then if you take them out, it starts to deteriorate. I'm going to put a quick example. In Cadiz, they started to building the cathedral in 17th century in sort of sedimentary stone. And in 18th century, the city becomes extremely wealthy. And they decide to finish the cathedral in limestone. They bring the most lavish limestone of Spain to finish the cathedral. But they didn't realize that the cathedral is close to the sea and that limestone has deteriorated extremely badly. And the whole building is at risk because they didn't realize that the humble sedimentary stone was perfect for the place, while the beautiful lavish limestone wasn't. So that's important as well. I will say as a lesson of keeping your things local and at the same time of beauty, because I mean you have the Cathedral of Cadiz, which is super beautiful, and then you ended up making a little mistake by bringing things to make it look even better and not look worse. So it's important to keep the local tradition.
Let's get back to the Middle East for a minute. Because, as you said, they basically built their huge megacities in 2 generations. not just the Middle East, but also Singapore and Malaysia too. Do you think that this sort of globalized look can become the tradition itself?
In some regard, it has become its own tradition. The global, you say, I mean, you have pointed it very rightly. There is a globalized look. There is a sense, I would say, unfortunate sense that you have the same things everywhere. So, and you can see, especially in the airports, you know, you go to the airport, you want to buy something, and all the things are the same. You have the same chocolates, the same stuff. But also in the cities, wherever you go, you find the same chains everywhere, and it has become the new look. And I think against that, and against that corporational look all over the world, I think that we need to claim back the interesting parts of locality. And yeah, it has become an unfortunately uniform look everywhere, and we shouldn't. It's very convenient, but I think that we should claim back what makes each of us unique. No, I mean, I always say that, especially, I mean, being Spanish, we have all the Spanish-speaking world in America, and I speak a lot. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Mexico, friends in Brazil, friends in Argentina, Colombia, but especially with the Mexicans, we always talk that we walk in the same direction, but we don't hold our hands in that regard. No, we understand each other, we do things our own way, we are going to the same direction, but we go on our own way, we understand, we help each other, but I think that's also important. No? I think that the convergent element.
You said that you arrived in Hungary just a couple of days ago.
Correct.
So I would like to ask your impression on the buildings in Budapest.
Yeah.
What do you think about, before the podcast we had a little talk about the conversation of the old buildings in Budapest. What do you think about it?
I think that, I mean, just for the audience, I mean, I came 2 days ago because I am doing a summer school with Ludovica University and Matthias Corvinus College and our own institution, the Classic Planning Institute, at the end of August. We still have some positions open. Thank you for letting me talk about our summer school. And basically we came just to know the city, to know the locations in which we will be working on. And I was deeply impressed with the city, the layering. I mean, it's a big city. It's very interesting the way the whole city was shaped for the millennium in the late 1800s, sorry. And I find it very interesting how individual elements, individual events can shape a city. I mean, Budapest has done its unique approach, but there are other cities that have been shaped themselves for a point in history. Sevilla did it twice, and Barcelona both did it twice in 20th century in the same years, 1929 and 1992. They completely reinvented themselves and reshaped themselves around an event. So that's very important, how also an event that is shaping the identity of the city, historical identity, also shapes the whole urbanism. And the city is not the same the before and after, and it's also for good. I was deeply impressed the way in the site of Pest, the city started layering from the close to the river, super monumental, and then start layering down and watering down as you go out. It's a very Haussmannian, Parisian, European style. So you can see that people were coming to Hungary. All people, Hungarians, were going to, especially to Paris, to learn the way, but then they came with their own ideas, and it's something that we don't talk enough, how the Beaux-Arts shaped the European city. And I was especially deeply impressed. I mean, we went to Ludovica University, very, very beautiful building. I was very pleased with the way the architects back then, they layered everything to create a beautiful building that also serves a military purpose, because that would be for another podcast to talk about how the different classical functions have a specific expression, and the correlation between orders and gender. It's very interesting as well. And especially the Buddha Castle. I was deeply impressed with the quality of the work there. It is incredible, the work of reconstruction, the quality of the craft, the quality of the stone masonry, the quality of the reconstituted stone, all the elements used there. They are very, very well layered and done. I mean, obviously, some people will say, oh, but you use concrete. And say, well, I mean, if in the late 1800s they had concrete, they would have used it. Actually,
yes.
A spoiler, they did. So it's not a big problem. And if you go to Rome, you see the Colosseum, it's all the brick and there was marble on top. So that's they didn't invent anything new on that sense in the castle. But the quality of the craft is impressive. And I think that Budapest has to teach the world a lesson on what they did with the castle. A good one, a very good lesson, because, we always have these things, the Church of Venice, new has to be differentiated from the old, but all of them are, because they are new, the profile is sharper, anyone can see that they are being newly done, and they have the little difference here and there to teach you that it is new. But I think I'm deeply impressed with the beauty of the city, the way everything has been layered down, because we went from all this area where you have the most lavish district to the most humble ones from the early 20th century. It's very, very interesting how so much care was put in every single detail and how everything was shaped around the 1890s for the millennium of the city. So it's a very beautiful city where you can learn a lot of both old architecture but also new traditional architecture, which is also very important for everyone wanting to be in this world.
I'm very glad that you found Budapest so impressive, and I am glad that you are enjoying your walk around the city. Our last question would be, what do you think makes a building timeless?
I think it's the connection with the present and the connection with the land, the connection as well with the program. Because, I'm going to quote a client that I had once, and that client wanted to have a house from the past, for the present, and the future. So that client wanted to have a house that could talk about the past. It was in central London, so could relate to the 1830s London, with this client particularly loved, with the present use of the house and the future use of the house, because the house was going to be for their children, and the children had a heavy input on how they wanted the house, so that because they knew that they were going to use it. So I think that sense of moving forward is what makes a building timeless. And even if I am going to play devil's advocate, that even makes a modernist building timeless. But the problem is that modernism is in many cases so obsessed with the novelty and with the moment that they forget about the legacy. So I think that building a legacy is important, and you can build a legacy in many different ways. You can build a legacy based on the tradition, and you can bring your own interpretation of tradition as languages. So and that's a big point on that. The same as music. No, Mozart and Beethoven composed the same music, but they are very different. And Palladio and Fischer von Erlach all did classical architecture, but they are very, very different. And in the same way we were talking before about the Buddha Castle and the Royal Palace in Madrid, both of them are examples of the part of Maria Theresa in the Buddha Castle. You can relate more or less the same times as the Royal Palace in Madrid. They are equal but different. So I think that's how you achieve the timeless, that people can also identify that there is a sense of lasting. I think that's what makes timeless. And obviously, because tradition is timeless in itself, it's the way of making you have the advantage points to start with that, to start with an element that you already know that is proved to be timeless because it has been there for 2,000 years. So it will stay there for the 2,000 years. I think it's also, we need to be humble as architects, creators in general, and think not only about our own ego, but also what we are leaving behind in the world. I mean, the same thing that the architects in the Middle Ages, they built the cathedrals. They didn't build them for themselves. They built them for the legacy. And even if you think about Palladio, he built all his villas for his clients, and now with Villa Rotonda, which is Villa Almerico, Villa Malcontenta, so all of them come from the names of their clients, and that's also something important because they all wanted to build a legacy. If people didn't want to build a legacy, probably we wouldn't be having all the palaces that we have. If Budapest didn't want to celebrate their millennium in the 1890s, we wouldn't have the beautiful city. And when they celebrated the millennium, they didn't want to do it for themselves. They wanted to do it for the people to come, to remember. That's why you walk around these beautiful streets and you feel timeless. You feel that you could still be in the 1890s. And that's the beauty of being timeless, is finding and building your own legacy.
Thank you, Pablo, for joining us today. And
Thank you.
Thank you for all the viewers for listening to the Scruton podcast.
Thank you very much.